Yo, dogs, what's up? It is I, Frizzeel, and I have returned from the dead. Um, so I've been working a good bit on the project again over the past few weeks, and made a good amount of progress. Specifically, the frame rate is much, much better than it was before. You can see right now that it's capped at 30 FPS, and that is strictly because of Fraps. I'm getting, basically, as I swim around this world, I'm getting about 20 to 60 FPS, which is really, really wildly varying. But it's better than 10 FPS, which is what I was getting before in earlier recordings. So if I go up into some crazy perspective like this, and I'm just kind of looking around at the world, you can even see it dipping now to about 20 frames per second, which is kind of the worst case that I was getting before, and it was pretty consistent. And now if I actually, if I'm closer to the ground, I'm actually getting around 60 FPS, although Fraps will cap it to 30. So here I am. If you don't know what Fraps is the a very standard piece of recording software for games, and it works very well, specifically for anything that uses a standard rendering technology, I guess, that uses your graphics card, like OpenGL or DirectX. So that's Fraps. But it actually caps your frame rate depending on your settings, and I record to 30 FPS because Fraps. And you can't actually upload 60 FPS to YouTube. So anyways, if I'm in a place like this, you can see it capping around 30, and I'm actually getting around 60 in these locations. And it's because you're able to cull out all the excess chunks that you can't see in these cases. And I'll actually show you what that looks like by going into wireframe mode later, so you can kind of see how the chunks are getting culled. But that is relying on an algorithm that was published by Mojang recently, where basically it's doing a breadth-first search traversal of all the chunks in the world and kind of doing some really conservative visibility testing with the blocks by doing like a flood search on each chunk, and then setting some bits to say which walls see which walls, and then you traverse all the chunks in that manner, and you get kind of a vague idea of what chunks are visible or invisible. It works more or less, but it is not perfect, and you'll get situations where the graph search of your world will kind of quote unquote leak out of wherever you're currently looking and get a whole bunch of chunks you don't want. But we'll go over that. But in situations like here we go, you can see how it just kind of popped to 30 or 40 FPS there, and that's from the traversal. And if I go up here, it'll go back to 20 or whatever, because the traversal will actually escape through a hole like this one right here. Yeah. So anyways, apart from that algorithm, I've done a lot of optimization at the shader level, and just a lot of internal engine work. Again, I hate saying that because that's not very descriptive, but that includes things like doing micro optimizations in the shader. That includes things like learning about new technologies in OpenGL and kind of applying them. That includes things like tweaking parameters. You'll notice that right now I am, I'm using about, just trying to guarantee here, manage. So it says I'm using about 6 gigs right now. Or is it on managed memory versus managed memory? Yeah, it says, no, I'm not even using that. Oh, I'm using about 3 gigs. It's 8%. Okay. Yeah, I'm using about 3 gigs of memory right now, which is way, way, way better than it was before. It was 10 gigs, and that was literally from a simple parameter tweak because I didn't need that much memory to store all the chunks. As I was saying before, when you load the chunks into memory, you need memory for every single block when the chunk is loaded in a very raw form. But once you turn that chunk into a mesh purely for rendering purposes, you can discard the chunk itself and leave the mesh laying around until you actually need that chunk again. And so the actual meshes, if you can make out the top right, which you can't unless you're looking at very high fidelity YouTube quality, but at the very top right, you can see I only have like 128 megabytes worth of chunk mesh memory, which is nothing. And I could probably, in fact, there's chunk allocations at 3 gigs. I'm thinking I could get that to be much, much less, especially at this phase, because I only need the chunks loaded in memory when I'm like running on them or otherwise doing stuff with them. And since I don't really have any gameplay yet, I could theoretically have almost no chunks in memory. And so I'm not very worried about the memory consumption at this point. I probably will be later, and that is an issue for another day. What else have I done? Previously, I was... So looking at the chunks, you can see that they kind of have a nice lighting effect to them, if you will. So the corners, like I think we were talking about this before, which is ambient occlusion. all the corners are kind of lit up just a little bit in a nice way, and the corners going inward are darkened, and it just looks really nice. And that was actually that was done a while ago, and basically the way I was accomplishing that was by I was actually computing light values in a very similar way to Minecraft, where alongside every block, I was storing a byte for the light. Not a byte, but I was storing information for lights. And that took up like a comparable amount of memory to the chunks themselves. So not double, but at least 50% more memory because of that. And a whole lot of code to maintain that. And because I've actually implemented shadow maps, which I will show you in a bit, but because I've actually implemented that, I was able to strip out all that code and all that memory consumption because it didn't seem like it was worthwhile to me, because I'm not going to have a whole bunch of point lights like you would see in Minecraft, where you just have like 30 torches strung up everywhere that light individual places. And even if I did, it wouldn't be a huge deal to do it with a deferred shading engine, at least to my understanding. You'd probably still be limited in a way. But I'm not doing a deferred lighting model right now, for those of you wondering. No, I'm doing a normal lighting model, and I probably will transition to a deferred lighting model. But right now I'm just kind of worried about getting a more consistent 60 FPS if possible. As I was saying, in like a view like this, what I'm doing now, I'm just kind of flying into the air. This is really hard, and I'm getting like even now like 20 FPS looking at this, and there's still plenty of optimization to be done. I just haven't done them yet, but the take home is that is the challenge, and that's a thing that I really desire, because I want in the game for you to be able to fly around and jump through the place. It's a great feeling, and it works. Now I know Fraps is capping me to 30 FPS, but I don't know without stopping the video if it's having just like an impact on my FPS in general. But that's just something to note that might be having an impact. I haven't messed with that. But yeah, I would like for this to be running a perfect 60 FPS, but if necessary, I'd be willing to put it at 30 if that is what it takes to be able to see further. Because frankly, like, you need to be able to see a lot, I think, at least so far in my experience, to feel free, to have like a feeling of freedom. You need to be able to see a good distance. And I could cut down the render distance and get to 60 FPS easily enough and still be ahead of like Minecraft and whatever. But that's not what I'm going for. If that makes sense. My priorities are to have a sense of freedom above having, I guess, the advantage that comes with 60 FPS, which is just kind of like an aesthetic effect almost. A little bit more precision if you're going for Twitch. I don't know if the gameplay would be twitchy enough where 60 FPS truly matters for that, but it is a fidelity experience, I guess. It's valuable in its own right. But yeah, 60 would be great. So what else is there? So let me think. I've done a lot of optimization at the shader level. I stripped out all the light stuff. Oh, you can see right now how I'm moving. I'm no longer just a camera floating in the air. I'm actually running around with these chunks, and it's kind of, it's interesting. The world feels different with this, and maybe that's just a subtle thing. Like, you know, maybe you're watching the video, it's like, who cares? But to me, at least, having been flying around on a camera this whole time and finally being something that moves around in the world and is affected by the voxels is kind of like a giant, you know, barrier that's been crossed. It's like, hey, these voxels are no longer just a graphic effect. It's like these things now, like they support gameplay, and now I'm kind of seeing that, the very initial beginnings of that. And it's fun to be able to kind of just drive around, you know, this world. Other things that are worth mentioning. You can see, if I can go back to the origin of the world, we can find the flying space bodies. I'd mentioned before, and you had witnessed before, most likely, really big issues with those, which were, I'm not going towards home. Here, let's work this out. Here we go. This is a little bit more homeward, I think. But you had seen the space bodies before, and there's basically an issue where they didn't quite know their orientation to the current planet you were on the graphics card, and so you would see really weird artifacts from this. Here we go. I think we're heading the right way. We can see the sky again. You can see it clipping in kind of a bad way right now. I'm not too worried about that. But basically, the space bodies were flying everywhere and didn't look amazing. And now it's actually, everything is really consistent. Everything makes sense. Like, there aren't weird artifacts with respect to the voxel terrain. And you'll probably notice that in comparison to the last video as I'm just flying around here, that nothing is like flickering. Nothing just, it doesn't feel like the voxels are like temporal or transient or something. They look like they're actually there. And that's the goal of a graphics system, ideally. And so that's good. It just looks much more professional and well done at this point. So I'm happy with that. Yeah, here are the space bodies. Now they aren't freaking out. If there are still bugs with the rotation, I haven't found them. They look to be doing pretty well. You can actually probably see, here's something worth noting. I've messed with some lighting calculations, not like with respect to shadows, but with respect to just like the way that light bounces off an object when you're viewing it. I've messed with a few of those kinds of calculations, and you can see the voxel bodies are a good example of what that might look like. You can see that the, how to describe it, the surface of the blocks kind of changes in brightness, reflectiveness as it rotates. And you can kind of see that more or less. And that is based on the angle of each face relative to the current light in the scene. The light is assumed to be at the player right now, even though there is no light casting shadows at the moment. But we will see a light soon enough. There's plenty more to show, so I'm going to cut the video and show you some other stuff I've been working on with respect to this engine. Here we are in wireframe mode. Now we can see the occlusion algorithm in progress. So you can see the overdraw happening behind the blocks that are directly in front of me, and the whole entire point of the algorithm is to reduce this overdraw. In my scenes, the overdraw is not too horrible, but you know, if later I have caves and stuff, it would be pretty horrible, and this would totally fix that, which is great. But you can see now as I move around that the voxels behind the voxels directly in front of me are like appearing and disappearing in things, and as I get maybe a little further away, they are more prone to disappear and not waste resources. That is entirely due to the algorithm, and it's great. It helps a ridiculous amount in situations where I'm close to the ground. Where it does not help, though, are situations in which I'm very high and I can see everything, and it's not an issue of overdraw, it's an issue of drawing way too much that can be seen. And at that point, you need a level of detail scheme to fix it, and my existing level of detail scheme doesn't really help with this situation. In part, it's because it has to be a certain distance away from you in order to even look acceptable. If the... I mean, I guess in wireframe mode, you can't really tell. It looks a little more sparse if you look at it from here. But if it's made like strictly out of polygons, like a dual contoured voxel engine would be, like Voxel Farm or something like EverQuest Next, then it would be basically the level of detail would be much more natural and you wouldn't notice it so much. But let's transition to a implementation of marching cubes that I have on the geometry shader. All right, here we are to an implementation of marching cubes on the graphics card. So this is, it actually runs faster now than my regular rendering scheme, which is kind of crazy if you think about it, but I know why, and it's kind of a technical reason. This is actually, it's actually slower than my normal rendering strategy, but I'm just doing, because I only have one rendering strategy for this particular test case, it's a little faster, if that makes sense, because I'm using different strategies in the other case. But yeah, this is what marching cubes looks like. The texturing is not perfect, it's not set in stone yet, but you can see everything is just kind of more polygonal. It's not as good as a dual contouring scheme that you'll see in other voxel games. But honestly, I don't know if I want a dual contouring scheme if I have this in my engine. The reason being is that the blockiness of this, the jaggedness of this is very stylish, I think. It could be stylized, and I think that could work for what I'm trying to do. I don't want an ultra realistic looking game. Screw realism. I want the game just to look... I want the terrain to do its purpose, but to look a little cartoony, perhaps in the process, to look stylized. And so big current artifact right now is obviously there are lines just going all throughout this, and those are actually the seams between chunks, and that is a big problem when you have a level of detail system in conjunction with a with something like marching cubes or dual contouring, which is how do you render the seams in a situation where one chunk has a different level of detail when it's adjacent to another chunk. And that is actually a really freaking hard problem, apparently. I have not tried tackling that particular problem, but I can think of some ways to deal with it. The first thing that comes to my mind is to, kind of like you do with blocks, is to kind of render the edges in a very conservative way, so that maybe it looks a little artifacty, maybe a little imperfect, but it would guarantee that in the case where the LOD differs between two different chunks, that it at least looks acceptable and there's not just like a giant gap, if that makes sense. But the thing you might notice with this that I'm really excited about is that it looks really natural with the level of detail scheme. So like you can see the voxel bodies over there, or just the ground beneath me right now. Like it doesn't, like that is not a huge loss of quality in my opinion. Like seeing kind of how the mesh changes there and like the number of voxels decreases, that's not bad at all. That looks really acceptable to me. And so that's part of the reason I want this, is that I could use this in conjunction with a normal blocky scheme, and at a far distance this might actually look really acceptable. In fact, it might look better, it might not really be noticeable, it might look more natural. The only real thing I have to do is basically have the texturing be a little bit better. Initially I was actually blending between multiple textures on these, but I couldn't get it to perform efficiently enough when I did that. It was actually really slow when I was multi-sampling different textures. So I've got to sort that out. And that's going to be a bit of work and experimentation. I'm sure there's a fast way of accomplishing that. I'm just not educated enough to do that. Fortunately, I have just purchased some textbooks and I will be going through them, and I'll probably figure that out by reading them. Hopefully, ideally. Although thus far, reading textbooks has not been much more useful than just surveying the internet, surprisingly. So the internet's amazing. That's the end conclusion of that. Trying to think what else. So we definitely need to go over shadow maps. I'm just wondering if there's anything else to really mention on the marching cubes approach that I have here. I need to get this working in conjunction with my normal blocks, but before I do that, I really have to approach the seams issue, and this will honestly look much better with that, especially if I get some texture blending going on, so that these triangles aren't strictly one texture. Although that might look nice, who knows? Maybe that's a strategy I could use for the engine. That would be pretty great. Yep, so let's move on to shadow maps. All right, we are back, and we have shadow maps available, or a shadow map available. Let's just hop up here and plonk, place the light, and voila! Shadows! Yay! So you can see the FPS just taking a massive dive there, and that is because I'm actually resampling the shadow map every single frame. But that's totally not necessary. It's just a little bit of work on my part. But as soon as I have that to where it's not resampling every frame, there shouldn't be any expense to the shadow map at all. There are a couple of problems with it though, considering that, because normally when you have something like the sun hanging overhead, you don't have to re-render the shadows, except like once every time that the sun moves, or when something significant moves that would require redrawing the shadow. In this situation, I can kind of do that. The problem comes up when I have something like, here, let's grab the light. So the voxel bodies come to mind, and while these look really freaking awesome with the shadows, and I'm really proud of it, yeah, 15 FPS, not fantastic. But you can see that looks really cool with the shadow just kind of dangling overhead, underneath, whatever. So the big problem that I'm going to have to tackle is how I'm going to actually not have to redraw the shadow map every frame with all these differing voxel bodies. And there's a couple of ways of doing that. The issue is I could store a separate texture for every single one of these. And that's kind of a lot, honestly. At least I think it is a lot. It might not be so. There's probably ways to optimize that. And obviously I don't need like a maximum resolution light, but yeah, doing it a deferred rendering model might have some implications for that, but I'm not going to move on to that until I've gotten some things that are in the current engine a little bit more solidified. Whoops, ran out of hard disk space. Anyways, that's it for shadow mapping and stuff. Still plenty of things to be done. Swapping to a deferred lighting model would be pretty epic. There's a lot for me to learn about that though, and it's lots of specific and technical information, unfortunately. So I will have to dive into that. But yeah, I'm pretty proud of the engine where it is right now. Things are really coming along. I think I can start, maybe a bit more in terms of optimization past the one big thing I need to do right now is basically right now I am not strictly delineating between the time that I push all of my data to the graphics card and the time that I render. I'm kind of doing it piecemeal. I'll like push a little bit of data to the GPU and then draw it, then push another bit of data and draw it. And the ideal way, to my understanding, is to actually push everything in one big go. And then after everything is on the graphics card, render it all in one pass. And that way you can actually render it to different targets and things as well, presumably. And so that would help with a number of things and open up a number of possibilities, which is all good. So yeah, that is progress on the engine. One thing I want to show you before I close out is work on a GUI system that's built on top of OpenGL that I've been working on, all hand-coded, not like pre-made libraries and stuff like that, because I couldn't really find anything I liked that was already implemented in Java, and I thought it'd be fun. And, GUIs are the kind of thing that it's really nice to have control over it. I wasn't looking for something that was like data-driven or whatever, like really standard solutions like that. To me, those things are like really hard to use. I don't know. It was just kind of an intuitive, I'm doing everything in Java. If I had other people working on this, I would expect them to figure out Java well enough to be able to do some simple things like inputting data. If it's not like a truckload of data, then it's not really a huge deal to have it in Java, because it's actually ultra convenient, because Java being a just-in-time compiled language and really good at dynamically changing things at runtime, having your data in Java is a huge bonus. It means that you can kind of debug things really quickly and iterate really quickly, which is a huge plus in terms of design. And that's kind of one of those things where I'm like, this is a place we could benefit from, rather than saying strictly designer, coder, you're either one of those two. You say design and code is a spectrum, right? Just like someone who plays guitar and writes music for it, cough, cough. Maybe they play the guitar, but they also write music, and to what extent they do either or the other, they do one or the other, that's a spectrum. It's not really a strictly delineated thing, and they kind of depend on each other. And I think programming and game design are very much in a similar category. They very much play on each other. How can you design a game if you don't know in which directions you can push the technology, if you don't know in which way you can take things? I mean, sure, you can always stand back and say, I want to have explosions and epic stuff and whatever, but you won't know what specific kinds of things you're able to do and which things you can really profit off of and really take advantage of unless you're just intimately aware of how software works, right? If you don't have an understanding of design itself, it's not a matter of, taking your ideas and just making all of your dreams come true in software. There's actual limitations and actual structure to how everything is done. And by having an understanding of that, you can create something much more emergently and much more, generally, you can be much more expressive, just like you can with an instrument. If you know how to play it, you could write a better song for that instrument, presumably, because you would know what could be done for that instrument. Yeah, that's my argument. That's the argument that I put forth. So, tangent. Let's go see GUI stuff. It is actually, I had like a mock Master of Orion system that I was creating just to kind of mess with that, because that game is like nothing but GUI. So I was like, I'll just have a little fun and make Master of Orion. It's really simple. So, BRB. Here we are at an alternate dimension where there are no voxels. There are only stars. Interesting. Yeah, so this is the mock-up Master of Orion application I was just kind of working on. Not a whole lot of depth here. It's all just working on the GUI components. And this is all kind of tiny, so apologies in advance. But you can see at the bottom there's some buttons, and I can press options. This looks like garbage. But if I click on a star, a really nice polished interface. This is actually a lot of fun to make, actually. So I can slide the individual components, and they all kind of play into each other, and stuff is displayed in places. And it's really simple. It's just right now it's not even textured, although it's set up to where you could. I've got all of my mock Master of Orion names. You've got the Jarlax, the Alkari. That might actually just be the real name. the Saxra, you know, all the normal ones, the Schumans. You're familiar with these guys, right? The Meglars, Thylons, the Gillicoids are in there somewhere. Yeah. So anyways, you can actually play it a little bit. So not a heck of a lot, but let's see. So you can go all the way into bio and, you know, oh my gosh, my population's going up. Holy crap. I can dump my, you know, I can increase my factory count. Oh my gosh. And then I can start dumping into tech, which is what you do in a Master of Orion. And I can pull up a text screen. Oh my gosh, a text screen. What? And yeah, so you can pick your tech and choose to go into it and then start dumping into it. Oh my gosh, I learned a tech. Yeah, etc., etc. This is literally all that I have. This is all it's probably ever going to be of it, unless I suddenly magically have free time, because this is all that was really needed to develop a GUI system. So you can see I have like a drop down. These kind of overlap each other in a bad way. I should probably work on that, but I can actually bring down a list of options and pick an option. Lasers and nukes, why not? And I have a slider that I can kind of go into, and the sliders can also be made to affect each other, basically. I can lock these or whatever, so you can't actually, you know, dump stuff into them. So if I lock these two and I do this, then it only goes into the other three. So all kinds of fun stuff. Oh, and there's a whole like I made like a generic attribute system. This is all just random. So yeah, if I actually keep going into tech, let's do that. Let's go. Let's keep going. Let's just push a little bit. You can actually get to a point where there's like generic modifiers that can be applied to planets and things on like a empire by empire or star by star basis. Lots of fun. Improved robotic controls. So if you're familiar with the game, you get robotic controls, and that increases how many factories you can support on a planet on a per population basis, right? And this is all stuff that I can reuse in other systems. So fun and a bun. It was also a nice break, a nice change of pace. But you can see this turn I have a 12% chance to actually learn it, and if I keep going, yeah. And so now it tells me the how many RUs left before I learn the tech. So oops, actually I have to go into industry. And so yeah. So basically Master of Orion with a better interface, because it's all just crap. That happens. Yeah, so it was fun showing you progress and things recently. Definitely need to do updates more frequently. Unfortunately, I've just been ultra busy at work. We were just pushing for SOE Live, and I didn't really have a lot of time that I was actually at home for that entire time, just a few weeks of that. So that's been pretty crazy. Well, anyhow, it's been fun. It's like 2 o'clock. I need to go to bed. If you want to keep up with me, if you want to keep up with projects that I've been working on, you want to keep up with Nebulous Racks or any music I want to put out, which I seriously need to do, you can subscribe, you can like. That's just a really convenient way for you to keep up with everything via YouTube. I'm also still in the process of doing like Hack/Mine streams, although it definitely has been a while since I've just been at work like 24/7 basically. Yeah, so subscribe, like, all that stuff. And I will see you guys soon. I will attempt to put music up in the near future. If you can't tell, the sound quality has gone way up because I'm actually using like a real recording microphone with a preamp and everything. And I've had this stuff sitting around. It's just I haven't had a preamp I could use with my computer until recently. So yeah, I'm going to use all this stuff for recording, and I'm going to be able to play music and record that. And I've actually already recorded a couple of things and not put them up because I wasn't really happy with them. And so that has actually taken up some time, because it takes like a day or two to do all that stuff, right? But it's definitely a learning curve, and I'm learning, and that's beneficial. So all time well spent. Anyhow, like, subscribe, whatevs. I will see you guys soon. Thanks for watching. Bye. Bye.